So please put your hands together for Richard Harrison and his story, Oranges and Lemons.
Hello. When I first stood up and told this one in the library, I was doing something a little different than I usually do, because I generally tell folk tales and fairy tales, so telling a personal story is like starting all over again. So I'm going to jump into it right away, because it is 3 hours long. Kyle didn't tell you that part. We can get started right now, and there will be cupcakes afterwards at midnight, so... The first time I purchased a home, it wasn't actually a house, it was a trailer home. It had a floor that went down like this, 45 degrees. It was great for racing Hot Wheels. You could get to the bathroom really quick, but getting back away from it was a bit of a struggle. So, also the furnace had a tendency to go out in the middle of winter, so you could practice skiing all you wanted in that little ice box, but after a while I decided I've had enough. And I moved out, and I ended up purchasing a different house, but it wasn't exactly a house either. It was somebody's fishing shack that they had tried to sort of turn into a house. It was partially a garage, partially a fishing shack. They tried to turn into a house. They failed miserably. It was a terrible place. It had a concrete slab floor with all the plumbing underneath, and when that plumbing went out, it was bad. They dug a big trench. All the rubble was piled up in the sort of one room that was the living room and the kitchen. And after the plumber had done this, he told me, I got to go away and do another job for a week and a half. I'll be back then. So, my furniture became rocks. I would sit on this pile of rubble and read Clan of the Cave Bear or whatever, And it also had a great big a well water pump that looked like one of those prototype submarines in the 1800s that went to the bottom and never came back up again. And you'd have to operate it manually by pulling this big crank. And then the automatic shutoff didn't work, so you'd have to go turn it off again. And the shower water had the effect of not only calcifying my hair, because there was so much minerals in it, but turning it orange. So for a little while, I was almost punk. So eventually, the well water destroyed the brand new water heater in a couple of years. Mice came in and took over and invaded and ate everything. And so I moved out and purchased my first real house. I saw it was in Stowe, and it was sitting on the front of a lot, and it was very, very inexpensive, and it was small, and I walked around the back, and there was this half-acre of land stretching out, and there was blueberry bushes in the back, and I thought, blueberry bushes, I'm buying it. I didn't even look at the inside. It was just those blueberry bushes, because this is how I make decisions in life, on a whim. So I ended up getting this home. I should have looked inside. I found this out later. But I was sitting down one day with the real estate agent, and we were going over some papers, and she suddenly looked up at me and said, I have to tell you this. Would it bother you knowing that somebody died in the house? And I was like, somebody died in the house? And, I think somebody died in the house. I tell you what, I will find out and get back to you. So she called me the next day, and she said, don't have to worry. Nobody died in the house. They died in the backyard. It's like, okay. They're probably fertilizing those blueberry bushes out there, Each one of those blueberries has a piece of their soul in it or something. But, and then... I also later found out that my ex-wife, one of her co-workers, was actually the person who was selling the house. And so I thought, I could ask her about it. So I said, could you ask that guy that you work with? We'll call him Brian, because I don't remember his name. Brian, could you ask Brian? If somebody died in the backyard, what happened? So she got back to me a couple of days later, and she said, don't have to worry. Nobody died in the backyard. They died in the neighbor's backyard. Okay. Well, that's not so bad, is it now? And I talked to the neighbors, actually, at some point, and they told me that nobody died in the backyard. It was actually a few yards down that somebody died. So this body's, moving south. It's probably in Canton right now and still going. But after moving into the place, I had a series of odd incidents happen. And if this sounds like it's going to be some sort of conventional haunting, it's not. It's just a series of very odd and peculiar events. And it all started with my mailbox. because my daughter and I had decided to go for a hike at one day, during the day. Beautiful sunny day. Thought, we'll go for a hike. So, you drive to go for a hike, because you can't hike to go for a hike. You got to drive to get there, drive to get back. And so we got back, and I pulled the car into the driveway, and there was an orange there. I thought, oh, look, an orange. Great. I picked it up, went around back, threw it in the compost. Very nice. Don't know how it got there, but I didn't think too much of it. It was just an orange. Well, the next day when I woke up, I got up and I went out to my front yard, and there was oranges all over the lawn. And I thought, okay, well, that's a little strange, where they came from. But I had to run off to work, so I did. And then I came home, and there was oranges and lemons this time scattered all over the backyard. So it was happening during the night and during the day. Somebody was seeding my yard with citrus, and the reason that this was unusual, very, very unusual, is because, my first lemon encounter, pulling into the driveway and running over lemons, and it was just like, lemonade, yeah. But the reason this was unusual, it was a very long backyard, and then the neighbors on the other side had long backyards. And after I moved in, all of the neighbors had put up fences for some reason. And so in order to do this, they could very easily scatter fruit on the front lawn. But in order to do the back, they'd have to go all the way to the backyard and scatter it all around. Or they would have to drive over to the next street and go into the neighbor's backyard and toss it over the fence and then go out and come around and put it in the front. It's like, what? Is this like a group operation with multiple people with fruit? But this continued actually for quite some time. I just got used to it. It's like, oh, yeah, come home from work. Hey, look, fruit. I never ate any of it. It wasn't like there was syringes sticking in it or anything, but I just didn't want to risk it. I remembered that story of Snow White and what happened with her and the apple. It's like, I'm not touching it. But it did eventually end, and it ended on a kind of a slightly different note. I woke up, there was no fruit in the front, no fruit in the back, except for one. There was a single grapefruit in the backyard. And after that, it stopped. Now, there was another little event that happened too that I didn't mention that sort of framed this. The first thing that happened is my mailbox vanished one day. My daughter and I decided to, go for a little walk again during the day, and we came back, and the mailbox was missing. It was a metal mailbox on one of those wooden posts that, go up and go out like that, and it was just gone. So somebody had wrenched it off the post in broad daylight, and not really vandalized it, because they didn't leave it lying on the ground. They took it too. It wasn't a very attractive mailbox. I don't know why they would do that, but it was gone. So it's like, oh, great, got to get a new mailbox now. So this happened before the fruit, but after the grapefruit, my mailbox came back. We'd gone for a walk to Handles to get ice cream, 20 minutes there, 20 minutes back. There was the mailbox. It was sitting on my front lawn. So they kept it for a few months and suddenly had a guilty conscience and decided to return it. Or maybe they used it at their house and it was, it's like, hey, that mailbox isn't getting as much mail. Hey, it's got the wrong numbers on it, that's what it is. Oh, yeah, well, let's just give it back to that guy we took it from. Okay, I don't know why. I don't know why anyone would take a mailbox, keep it, and bring it back. I'm going to assume it's an act of kindness, because I like to think well of people. But, but the most unusual event that ended up occurring, and it was not long after the fruit mailbox incident, happened at night time. And as Kyle had mentioned, I actually do go out and do storytelling, but generally what I do is fairy tales and folk tales, which is very different from doing a personal story like I'm doing now. So it's fun to have an opportunity to try something different. But stories from England and Ireland, and often done in outrageous accents or voices, or me pretending to be a goblin and prancing around in a Robin Hood outfit kind of thing. You go, oh, because he's never heard a compo, hey, yeah. Most of my stories are incomprehensible, which is nobody ever hires me twice. So you actually get to hear me talk and you can comprehend me. Great. And I was reading a book that was based on Irish folklore, and this particular book concerned the idea of the other world. The idea that another world exists parallel to our own, a fairy-haunted realm. And if one happened to be standing at a crossroads at a certain time of year, or walking by a fairy mound at the bright time of night, one might cross the barrier and the veil to this other world, and dreamlike events may ensue. First time I got to do that with a microwave, that was not, a microphone. I called it a microwave. That's how technologically inept I am. So, yeah, go put the food in the microphone for me. Okay, it won't fit. But I was reading this story, and so for that evening, my mind was steeped in Irish folklore, and I put the book down and I went off to bed and I fell asleep. And I heard a noise outside my window. It's like 4 a.m. in the morning. It was still very, very dark out there, and I could hear this scrappling. I don't know if scrappling's a word, but that's what the noise sounded like, honestly, outside my window. And I could see a dark, shadowy form moving around there, and I had no idea who it was. My bedroom window was on the lower floor, by the way, so it wasn't like some really tall guy. It's down on the lower floor, and they were right there, right by the window, and I was a little bit frightened, and I went over to the window, and I opened it up, and I said, "Who's out there?" Because I didn't know what else to say. What do you say? What do you say when someone's outside your window? And the voice responded, "It's me." It's like, okay, that doesn't help. It's not anyone I recognize, So it was like, what are you doing out there? Well, I'm hiding my stash. This is where I hide my stash. I go, well, what's your stash? He goes, well, it's like my stash. It's a secret. It's my stash. It's like, what? Who are you? What's wrong? Don't you trust me? It's like, really? That's what he said. Of course I don't trust you. I can't even see you, and you're hiding a stash outside my window. I eventually. It's this, conversation. Oh yeah, and then he had the audacity to say, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "Well, this is my house. I live here. Thank you very much." And so, after this odd sort of semi-surreal conversation, any conversation at 4 a.m. in the morning through a window with a stranger is surreal. So eventually, I found out it was actually a 17-year-old boy. But he never would mention what this stash was. Well, I told, well, you got to, get your stash out of here. You can't keep a stash here. Go take it to someone else's bedroom window and bury it there. I don't want your stashes under my window. So he's like, well, okay, can I use your phone and give my mom a call to come and get me? Because I don't know where I am. It's like, so he's burying his stash in a place where he doesn't know where he is. That's not going to help him find it again, I guess. But I said, okay, come around to the front door. And at this point, I was a little bit frightened because I hadn't actually seen him yet. I mean, he said he was a 17-year-old boy. I didn't know what he was at that point. And so I did, as part of my storytelling, I wear a costume, and sometimes I have a sword, just really for show. But it's the only thing I had that was sort of dangerous, when compared to the whisk or the egg beater. So I went around and I got the sword and I pulled the sword out and I went to the door and tried to look as threatening as I could in my night clothes and, carrying a sword. And I opened up the front door and he didn't look fazed that I was carrying a sword. It was a teenage boy. He was fairly nondescript. He looked normal. I can't even remember what he looked like. Didn't seem bothered by the sword at all, but I gave him the phone and he started to call his mom. And I could hear, the one end of the conversation, "Mom, yeah, can you come get me?" "What address is this?" Yep, 3847 Howell Road. "Oh, I'm at 3847 Howell Road." "Oh. Okay, my mom's gonna come. She's gonna come by and pick me up at the airport in a little bit." "What?" And I could sort of hear the mom say, "Who are you talking to?" And the kid responded by saying, "Oh, don't worry, Mom, it's a stranger, but you don't have to worry about him. He's Irish, too." And I'm like, okay, for one, I'm not Irish. I wasn't wearing green, you know. I didn't have the leprechaun hat on that night, and I didn't even understand the "to" part because he didn't seem Irish. His mom didn't sound Irish from what I could tell, and I don't know why that was reassuring. It's like, did his mom, "Don't take candy from strangers unless they're Irish. Then it's fine." So, but. Anyway, you know, after this, I told him to go take his stash and take it away. So, okay, I'll take my stash. And he walked down to the Kent airport, apparently, to get a ride home. So I tried to go back to sleep. It was a little bit difficult with all this going through my head, but you know, I reached the point where I got a little sleep and I had to wake up and go to work. And I don't allow myself very much time to get ready before I go to work because I like sleep quite a lot. So just enough time to shower, eat some cereal. But I thought, well, I better go around to the side of the house and see what this stash is. So I went around to the side, and there was a hole sort of dug under my window. And scattered all around it was change, like pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, just all over the place, tons of it. And there were lighters. I counted them. There was 29 lighters scattered on the ground, too. There was also a huge stack of Dairy Queen coupons for free blizzards. Every single one of them was for a free blizzard. And then, sort of in the middle of all this, there was a birth certificate with a name on it. So I was bewildered and confused at this point, but I thought, you know, I'm going to go get my phone and I'll hit, you know, the redial and call the person and have them come get, you know, the birth certificate and the other stuff. So I called and a guy answered the phone, and I said, "Do you have a son named?" And I read the name on the birth certificate. He said he had never heard of the person. He didn't know who that name was. So I told him the story of what had happened during the night. You know, and all the things lying here, and he just said, "I'll be over there in a minute." Like, okay. I hung up. I really had to get to work at this point, so I went out to my car, but the guy wasn't lying when he said a minute. So before I could even pull out of the driveway, this truck comes tearing in. A guy gets out, and he has a carved wooden box in his hand, and he comes over and he gathers up all the change, all of the lighters, the birth certificate, puts it in the carved wooden box, closes the lid, gets back in the truck, and drives away. I look back at this, and I have absolutely no idea why any of this happened. I mean, even the small details, like, why not a plastic bag? Why a carved wooden box? But I finally reached the point that I don't really want an explanation, because that would just ruin the mystery. I would just rather think that for a little while I crossed over to the other side. And thank you very much.